Previously on the Vampire Diaries, Damon turned Vicky into a vampire, but when Vicky attacked Jeremy and Elena, Stefan was forced to kill her. To avoid the council discovering their secret, Damon framed Stefan's friend, Lexi, and killed her. Meanwhile, Bonnie received a powerful magical amber crystal from Caroline. Meanwhile, Bonnie had a nightmare under the influence of the crystal. She dreamt of her great-great-great-grandmother, Emily.
It's coming.
Bonnie was tormented, to the point where she couldn't distinguish between reality and dreams. One moment she was at school, and the next she was wandering through ruins. Emily told Bonnie that everything began in this very place.
And this is where it has to end. Oh, this isn't real. Help me.
What is similar about these two methods is that the right triangles help give us an accurate measurement. Using between position and the...
Her ancestors' entanglement made Bonnie jittery all day, and the root of it all was the cursed magical crystal. The evil vampire Damon came to Bonnie, demanding the crystal, but Bonnie remembered her grandmother's warning. The crystal must never fall into the hands of evil, so she'd rather throw it away than give it to Damon. Damon, however, knew what was happening to Bonnie. He told her, "I can help you get rid of her," but Bonnie wasn't swayed. It turned out that 150 years ago, Damon had made a deal with Bonnie's ancestor, and this crystal was the key. Bonnie shared what happened with her best friend, Elena, and in her presence, threw the crystal into an abandoned field, immediately feeling a sense of relief. Since Tanner's death at Damon's hands, a new history teacher, Alaric, arrived at the school. He also wears an antique ring on his hand. Alaric, using Jeremy's failing grades as a reason, told him to write a paper on the town's history for extra credit. As mentioned earlier, Jeremy's ancestors dealt with vampires, and it seems that Alaric's identity is not simple. Later, Alaric met Jeremy's aunt, Jenna, through him, and since Jenna had just gone through a breakup, they hit it off as they talked. Jeremy frowned, suddenly realizing he'd become the third wheel. Later, when Alaric walked Jenna home, he stood outside, looking in but not daring to step over the threshold. Jenna had planned to invite Alaric inside, but since Jeremy was there, she changed her mind.
You know what? I'm not gonna invite you in. Jeremy.
Oh, some other time then. Have a good night, Jenna.
There was definitely something off about Alaric. Elena told Stefan about Damon threatening Bonnie. What exactly was the purpose of that crystal? Stefan decided to confront his brother to get answers. Meanwhile, Elena, in an attempt to ease the tension between Bonnie and Caroline, invited them both to dinner, but to their surprise, the crystal that Bonnie had tossed away mysteriously reappeared in her bag. It seemed they'd need to find another way to deal with the problem. Caroline suggested they hold a seance, so the three girls lit several candles on the floor. Then they sat in a circle, closed their eyes, and Bonnie called upon her ancestor, Emily. At first, the mood was lighthearted, and they were all trying to stifle their laughter, but suddenly, the candle flames flared up violently, and they felt a chill in the air. The atmosphere turned eerie all of a sudden. Just then, strange things began to happen. The flames crackled loudly, and the windows flew open, startling them all. Bonnie immediately threw her ancestor's necklace to the ground. At that moment, all the candles went out, and Elena quickly turned on the lights, but when they looked around, the necklace was gone. Could it be that a ghost was in the house? Meanwhile, Stefan, hoping to extract some information from Damon, took the initiative to reconcile with his brother. A few drinks later and after a friendly competition, the two vampire brothers seemed to have rekindled the closeness they had over 100 years ago. Damon finally opened up. The reason he could never let go of Catherine was that Catherine wasn't dead at all. She had been sealed in an ancient tomb beneath the church. Damon's purpose in returning to the town was to bring Catherine back to life. Stefan was utterly shocked by this revelation. Over 100 years ago, the villagers had driven the vampires into the church, planning to burn them alive. So Damon approached Emily. Emily, who was Catherine's maid on the surface, was in fact a powerful witch. They made a deal. Emily used magic to seal Catherine beneath the church to save her from being burned alive. The crystal was the key, and in exchange, Damon protected Emily's bloodline. Everything suddenly became clear to Stefan. No wonder Damon had saved Emily's child all those years ago. Back to Bonnie and the others. They split up to search for the necklace, and eventually, Bonnie found it in the bedroom, but as soon as Bonnie stepped inside, the bedroom door slammed shut. Elena and Caroline were locked outside. and all they could hear was Bonnie screaming from inside. Moments later, the door opened on its own. Bonnie covered her face with her hands, and when they saw her again, she seemed like a completely different person.
I'm fine.
Caroline thought she was playing a prank, but Elena sensed something was off. Bonnie's expression was unfamiliar, like she wasn't herself. Little did they know, in the mirror, Bonnie had taken on Emily's appearance. She had been possessed by Emily. When Bonnie stepped outside, Elena called out Emily's name, and Bonnie froze for a moment, then admitted it. Emily had no intention of keeping her promise. She was determined to destroy the crystal. Elena quickly told Stefan about this, but Damon overheard, and fury consumed him. As soon as Stefan hung up the phone, Damon had already vanished. Emily made her way to the ruins of the church, but Damon intercepted her, accusing her. "You're going back on your word. I've waited over 100 years for this." Emily, however, said that circumstances had changed, and they could not be allowed to come back to life. Damon used his teleportation, but Emily blasted him away with magic, pinning him to the treetop. Not long after, Stefan arrived and rescued Damon. By this time, Emily had already completed the spell, and Stefan learned the truth from her. It turned out his brother had been hiding part of the story. The tomb didn't just hold Catherine, it contained 27 vampires in total. Imagine, vampires who have been starved for over 100 years. If they were to return to the world, the town would become a living hell. Damon didn't just want to rescue his lover, he also wanted to lead this army of vampires to take revenge on the town. Stefan couldn't stand by and let that happen. He held his brother back, giving Emily the time she needed to cast her spell. Flames roared to life beneath Emily's feet. At the same time, Elena arrived. Emily threw the crystal into the air, where it exploded into dust. Damon's century-long wait ended in vain. When the flames died down, Bonnie regained control of her body, standing there in a daze. In a fit of rage, Damon tackled Bonnie and bit her. Fortunately, Stefan intervened just in time, stopping him and making the barely conscious Bonnie drink his blood. Miraculously, Bonnie's wounds healed. Afterward, Damon told his brother that Catherine had never compelled him. Everything he did was by choice. Now that he would never see her again, a heartbroken Damon decided to leave this place of sorrow. Elena comforted Bonnie and planned to take her home to explain everything. Then, Elena quietly asked Stefan if Bonnie would turn into a vampire. Stefan explained the steps of turning into a vampire. As long as Bonnie didn't die immediately, and after some time, her body flushed the blood out, she would be fine. Now that peace had returned to the town, Stefan was the one planning to leave. But this time, Elena tried hard to make him stay. Tonight, some people were rekindling old flames, some were ready for a fresh start, some cried through the night, and others wept over a lover who was about to leave. As Jenna prepared to throw away her ex-boyfriend's things, the doorbell rang. It was late. Who could be so rude at this hour? When Jenna opened the door, it was her ex-boyfriend Logan, who had been missing, but he had clearly already been killed by Damon.
Aren't you gonna invite me in?
Logan was eager to come inside, but Jenna, now completely disappointed in him and with a new love interest, refused to let him in. Strangely, though the door was wide open, Logan didn't dare take a step inside. Jenna would never know just how wise her decision was that night. Logan, frustrated and ravenous, went out searching for prey. An old man throwing out the trash smelled too old, so Logan didn't make a move. A woman out for a nighttime jog brushed past Logan. She recognized him immediately and started chatting. After all, Logan was a well-known reporter in town. Logan smiled as he sized up his prey, and in the next second, he lunged at her, draining her of blood. The next day, Stefan and Damon were about to leave Mystic Falls when Sheriff Forbes arrived and interrupted their plans. Another murder had occurred in town, and the victim had also been drained of blood. After Sheriff Forbes left, Stefan confronted his brother, asking if he was responsible, but if it had been Damon, he wouldn't have left any evidence. They realized there were other vampires in town. Stefan decided to stay. Damon acted indifferent on the surface, but in reality, he was secretly investigating the matter. The vampire tracking pocket watch came in handy at this moment. Since Damon himself was a vampire and could interfere with the watch, he manipulated Caroline into using it. After tracking down a warehouse, Damon used his compulsion to erase Caroline's memory, but it turned out to be a trap set by Logan. The moment Damon entered the warehouse, Logan shot him with wooden bullets. Damon was in disbelief. The vampire hunter he had killed was not only still alive but had been turned into a vampire. Logan assumed it was Damon who killed him and then turned him into a vampire, but judging by Damon's reaction, it wasn't him. This meant there were other vampires in town. Logan started talking about his experience after coming back to life. He couldn't go home, could only move around at night, but he had come to thoroughly enjoy the killing and the taste of blood. That's when Damon noticed the piles of bodies in the warehouse. The ones the police found were only the tip of the iceberg. The Dragon Slayer has become the evil dragon. The former vampire hunter Logan had lost even more of his humanity after turning into a vampire. This truly left Damon astonished. Logan demanded Damon tell him the secret to walking in the sunlight. Damon discreetly covered the ring on his hand, refusing to reveal the method of becoming a daywalker no matter what. Logan nearly beat him to death. That night, the school was hosting an exhibition. Mayor Lockwood and Sheriff Forbes were both there. They knew the truth about vampires and were secretly protecting their children. Stefan also stayed close to Elena, but someone who was supposed to be dead appeared at the event. Logan. Only a few people knew about his death, and Stefan was one of them. Stefan told Jenna and Elena to leave, then confronted Logan about why he was there. Logan wanted to ask Stefan how to become a daywalker, but Stefan also kept the secret tightly. Logan issued a threat. As a well-known reporter in town, all it would take was one word from him to expose the Salvatore brothers' identities. Stefan threatened Logan right back if that happened. Logan wouldn't survive either. Logan's gaze turned cold and sinister. He then went to Sheriff Forbes. When Sheriff Forbes saw Logan, she was both shocked and terrified. Logan had once been ordered by Sheriff Forbes to hunt vampires, and afterward, Sheriff Forbes covered up the truth by casually burying Logan. Now that Logan was standing in front of her alive, his true identity was obvious. After Logan left, Sheriff Forbes quickly called for backup, referring to Logan as Vampire Number 5. This is interesting, counting the Salvatore brothers. Along with the already deceased Vicky and Lexi, Logan is exactly number 5. At the exhibition, Jeremy and Tyler clashed again, and Mayor Lockwood took them outside. On the surface, he told everyone to have them shake hands and make peace, but once they were away from the crowd, Mayor Lockwood urged them to fight it out like men. This kind of parenting is seriously questionable. Thankfully, the new teacher, Alaric, stepped in to break it up. Since he had been getting closer to Jeremy's Aunt Jenna, it was only natural he'd look out for Jeremy. However, it seemed that Alaric and Mayor Lockwood had now formed a grudge. Meanwhile, Logan knocked out and kidnapped Sheriff Forbes' daughter, Caroline. He wanted to turn Caroline into a vampire, too, and see how Sheriff Forbes would choose. What Logan didn't expect was the Salvatore brothers teaming up to take him down. Logan's return and his killing spree put the Salvatore brothers at risk of exposure. They couldn't let that happen. Damon fired several shots, paying Logan back in kind. Stefan took Caroline to safety, while Damon grabbed an iron rod, ready to finish Logan off. Someone had to do the dirty work, and it might as well be him. In a desperate bid to save his life, Logan claimed to know the way to the tomb and proposed a meeting at the church to share the details. Damon hesitated. At that moment, police sirens grew closer. Damon told Logan to punch him, then make his escape. They successfully tricked Sheriff Forbes.
I just wasn't strong enough.
When Stefan returned to the castle, he found Elena waiting for him. Stefan remained determined to leave. He and his brother had dealt with Logan, and leaving would be better for everyone. Elena, however, impressed Stefan with her confession. They kissed passionately, from outside to the hallway, and finally to the bedroom, where their relationship took the next step. Logan, returning to his hideout, was confronted by Alaric. Having just taken a beating, Logan wasn't eager for more trouble. When Alaric warned him not to harass Jenna in the future, Logan couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that the new love was picking on the old love. Logan turned around, ready to reveal his vampire form, but Alaric had a wooden stake hidden up his sleeve. As Logan lunged at him, Alaric stabbed him in the heart with the stake. Not long after, the police found Logan's body, along with the mountain of victims piled up in the warehouse. Sheriff Forbes assumed Damon was responsible and hurriedly called to thank him. Damon was completely baffled, as he was waiting for Logan to show up for their meeting at that moment. When he learned Logan had been killed, Damon once again found himself in despair. Just when he had found a lead, it was lost again. In contrast to his brother's disappointment, Stefan was in an incredibly good mood. While wandering around the house, Elena stumbled upon a photograph of Catherine. Her happiness immediately turned to shock. She realized she might have been nothing more than a replacement for Catherine. Without even saying goodbye, she drove off in the middle of the night. As Elena was drowning in sadness, she suddenly saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. There wasn't time to change direction. She hit the person and flipped the car. What she didn't expect was that the person, despite having all their limbs broken, slowly stood back up and walked straight toward her as if nothing had happened. This was no ordinary human. Just as the figure in black was approaching Elena, he suddenly vanished in a blur. At the same moment, another figure arrived, moving at a speed that broke the sound barrier. Elena was overjoyed. It was Damon. Damon rescued Elena, who was trapped in the car. As Elena began to lose consciousness, she murmured softly,
I look like her.
Damon gently stroked Elena's cheek. He had feelings for Elena too, or more precisely, he loved her face, because Elena looked exactly like Catherine from over 100 years ago. The next day, when Elena woke up, she found herself in Georgia, brought there by Damon. Elena shouted to be taken home, but Damon wasn't exactly a noble vampire. The number of lives he had taken was countless, so Elena made a deal with him. She agreed to accompany Damon to see an old friend. Meanwhile, when Stefan found out his brother had taken his girlfriend, he was frantic. Stefan turned to Bonnie, asking her to cast a spell to see if Elena was safe. At first, Bonnie refused. She didn't want to get too involved with vampires, but when she learned it was Damon who had taken Elena, Bonnie immediately changed her mind. Bonnie used Elena's necklace to perform the spell, but she received no response. Ever since Bonnie had been possessed by Emily, fear had caused her to lose her powers, and now she couldn't help Stefan. Over in Georgia, Damon brought Elena to a bar, where the owner, Bree, was overjoyed to see him and immediately greeted him with a passionate kiss. It turned out Bree was one of Damon's old flames, and her real identity was that of a witch. While they are chatting, Damon thoughtfully helps Elena avoid drinking because she is still a minor. Bree's feelings toward Damon were complicated, both love and hate. Damon had come to ask Bree to help him break the seal on the tomb and rescue Catherine, but Bree told him that Emily's spell was far too powerful, and there was no way to undo it. While Damon went to find Elena, Bree secretly made a phone call. Knowing how sharp a vampire's hearing is, she masked the sound with the noise of a blender. Meanwhile, Bonnie asked her grandmother for help in regaining her powers. Sheila told Bonnie that by facing her fears, her powers would naturally return. So, Bonnie ventured alone to the ruins of the church, confronting the memories that terrified her. Though she didn't recover her magic, Bonnie accidentally stumbled upon the entrance to the tomb. The star-shaped emblem on the stone door was clearly Emily's work. Stefan, worried about Bonnie, went to her grandmother's house. However, Sheila immediately saw through Stefan's identity as a vampire and didn't want to invite him in, but she directed Stefan to the other side of the church ruins. While Jeremy was at the library researching the town's history, he ran into a girl named Anna. They hit it off, enthusiastically discussing the legends of vampires throughout history. Anna believed that vampires were real, but Jeremy thought vampires were merely a literary device, a creative concept from the old world. It wasn't until dusk that Stefan found and rescued Bonnie. While trapped underground, Bonnie had sensed the vampires sealed in the tomb, a group of ravenous creatures, starved for over 100 years. If they were unleashed, it would be catastrophic. Stefan promised her that he would never let them escape. Meanwhile, Elena's brief time with Damon had changed her perception of him. Beneath his reckless, cold exterior, Damon hid a gentler, more sensitive side. Elena began to lower her guard around him, and she let herself drink and join in the fun with the locals. A man watched the situation coldly from afar. When Bree poured him a drink, she subtly signaled to him. Clearly, he was up to no good. Sure enough, the man kidnapped the drunken Elena to lure Damon out. As Damon was distracted, the man brutally broke both of Damon's legs. The man turned out to be a vampire as well. The man doused Damon in gasoline, but Damon didn't even know who he was. The man was furious, accusing Damon of killing his lover. It finally dawned on them this man was Lee, Lexi's boyfriend. Lexi, who had been killed by Damon. Elena had once had a heart-to-heart with Lexi, who had mentioned that her boyfriend was human.
I was. If you want to be with someone forever, you have to live forever.
Elena was deeply shaken, wondering if her relationship with Stefan would follow the same tragic path as Lee's, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. Elena hurriedly pleaded with Lee not to take revenge, reminding him, Lexi said you were a good man. This isn't what good men do. After some inner struggle, Lee was convinced. Lee spared Damon's life, but Damon wasn't nearly as merciful. Before leaving, he went to bid farewell to Bree, who had betrayed him. Bree's voice trembled as she told him her blood was laced with vervain, implying that her blood would poison him. But Damon didn't need to use his fangs to kill her. In a desperate attempt to save herself, Bree revealed the key to unlocking the tomb's seal, Emily's spellbook. Damon, still skeptical, thrust his hand into his former lover's chest and crushed her heart. He is still the same devil, Elena. Of course, had no idea about any of this. On the drive back to town, Elena playfully reminded Damon, "Don't forget I saved your life." After the trip, Elena was in a much better mood and gave Stefan a chance to explain himself. Stefan confessed, "You're not a replacement for Catherine. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you." It turned out that Stefan had saved Elena years ago when her family's car crashed into the river. He hadn't been able to save her parents. Everything became clear to Elena. No wonder she had been the only one to miraculously survive. From that moment on, Stefan had been watching over her, wondering how she could look exactly like Catherine. His investigation eventually revealed that Elena had been adopted. Elena decided to confront her aunt for the truth. Jenna's shocked expression confirmed that Elena had indeed been adopted. Meanwhile, Damon was drowning his sorrows at a bar, where he happened to run into the town's new teacher, Alaric. Damon nodded in his direction, but that one glance stirred up a whirlwind of emotions in Alaric. He could never forget that face. Damon really had made enemies everywhere.